Mirrors are portals.
Welcome to Paranormal Nightshift, your home for all things that go bump in the dark and your fan stories told here. Have you ever felt like you were being watched? Have you ever seen something out of the corner of your eye? Or been in a house to where you know you're by yourself, but you never quite feel alone? I've heard all sorts of warnings about how mirrors are portals, but we have them everywhere. Today's story serves as a warning. This comes from Rebecca, and is called The Man in the Mirror. My grandmother was always a very loving soul, but she would play tricks on the kids. We always assumed that all the stories that she told us were just stories that grandmas told, try to make you act right. She would tell us stories about the witch in the window, the ghost in the barn, and the man in the mirror. But we always didn't believe her. None of it made any sense. It was just stories, just grandma being grandma. Until she got elderly, it was very hard for us to understand what she was talking about. She had Alzheimer's. My mom took care of her a lot, but she would talk about the man far more than she would anybody else. As her Alzheimer's and dementia got worse, she would start to smash things in the house, anything that had a reflection. Mom came in one day and all the mirrors in the house were completely smashed. All the windows, anything that had a reflection, smashed. Grandma said that she didn't want him to see her anymore, that he was always watching her. It got to a point to where my mom had to stay with her all the time. My grandmother was far more active at night. She said that's when the man came out. She had a nurse during the day, and the nurse would try to calm her down, but at night, she said that's when the man appeared. So my mom ended up having to stay at my grandmother's house to help her out. One night, my mom was sleeping on the couch and my grandmother came downstairs yelling and hollering, "You forgot to cover the mirrors. You forgot to cover the mirrors. He's in the house now. Have to cover the mirrors at night. That's when he comes out. You didn't cover the mirrors. You have to cover the mirrors. Now he's in the house." My mom, of course, did not believe him. She tried to calm my grandmother down, but she kept telling him, "Tonight is going to be bad. He's already here." Later that night, my grandmother woke up screaming. My mom rushed upstairs, and my grandmother said, "He's in the house." She felt him in the house. He was sitting on her bed. Now he was choking her. Of course, my mom didn't believe her, but then she had what looked like burn marks around her neck. Hands burnt into her flesh. My mom didn't know what to do. She was freaking out. Clearly, something had grabbed my grandmother. As my mom exited the room, she saw the mirror that my grandmother had smashed again, and she saw him, a man dressed all in black, standing right behind my grandmother. She turned, and of course, he wasn't there. Now he was appearing anywhere. Everywhere that had a reflection, my mom would see the man in all black standing behind my grandmother. He was in the bathroom. He was in the windows. He surrounded the house. Mom grabbed my grandmother's hand, trying to exit the house, trying to leave the house. They had to get out of here. My mother and grandmother saw this man everywhere. As she went to the front door, she saw her reflection in the mirror of the front door. And of course, it grabbed her. The man had gone through the reflection and had his hands around my mother's throat, threw her to the ground, was choking her, physically choking her, dragging her across the floor. My grandmother began to pray as loud as she could, but nothing was working. My mom passed out. My grandmother called me and explained to me what had happened. I didn't believe it. Of course I didn't believe it. But both my grandmother and my mom had burn marks, these hands on their throats. Something had happened. How do you chalk this up? How do you explain this to anybody? Nobody believes you in these situations. All we knew was that grandma had to get out of the house. We had no other option. We put her in a palliative care facility, and she stayed there. My grandmother lived for another couple years in this assisted living facility. She was adamant, no mirrors, no windows. She just didn't want to see the reflection because that's where the man was. It didn't make sense to anybody, but it was our normal. We had to cover anything that was around, especially after night, because that's when the man came. We tried to do whatever research we could, tried to do whatever prayers we could, sage the house, but none of us just went into Grandma's house. It was just, maybe that's where the man was, because nothing happened for quite some time. She got a new nurse, and somehow, some way, a window didn't get covered. My grandmother didn't make it through the night. I can't imagine what horrors happened to her that night. They said that she had suffocated in her sleep. Probably just fell asleep and didn't wake up, just stopped breathing. But we saw the hand marks on my grandmother's throat when they did the autopsy. Burns is what it looked like. They did a medical examination, but of course, nothing was found. How do you explain that some sort of entity, a man, comes through a mirror and is trying to hurt you? We don't know why he wants to hurt us, but I see him too now. I never believed my mom's stories. I always just played along with it. But he's here all the time. I see him out of the corner of my eyes. I cover every mirror. We just don't know how to get rid of him. He only comes out at night, and for some reason, he's very, very violent and tries to attack us. I'm asking you to read this story. I just don't know what else to do. How do I live my entire life knowing that there's mirrors and windows everywhere? How do I block this at night? Ask your fans, please, for me. What do I do next?